Hey everybody, this is part 2 of how to play Eclipse. If you missed part 1, I've got it linked up here in the corner of the screen, and all of my Eclipse videos are linked in the description below. Now we're going to cover everything that wasn't covered in part 1. That includes everything in the rulebook, as well as a bunch of answered rules questions that I found on BoardGameGeek.com. If you don't have time to watch the whole video, just stick around for the first part, because I'm going to start by talking about the most important things first. For the sake of time, I'm not going to cover all of the tactile discoveries and race abilities. The rulebook does a pretty good job of that. There's a bunch of rules references in the back too. But I will be spending some time on the more complicated ones that need some rules clarifications. So let's get started. Every ship pins one opposing ship and prevents it from moving. It's kind of like ships lock onto each other and prepare for combat so that they can't run away until they fight each other. So in this example, my dreadnought is pinned by this little interceptor over here, and neither of them can move away. But let's say I take a move action and move my interceptor into that sector. Now I am able to move my dreadnought away, because I always get to choose which of my ships are pinned by enemy ships. Now in this more complicated example, to figure out how many of my ships are pinned, I need to count up all of the opposing ships, including these non-player ships. So here it's 1, 2, 3, 4 of my ships that would be pinned here. And by the way, the GCDS pins all ships because it's so massive. These black techs are called rare because there's only one of each of them. But also, they don't count towards the number of techs you draw from this bag every round. So that means every time you draw a black tech, you just put it in this bottom row of the tech tray, and you instantly draw a replacement for it. Now, there's only 7 spots for rare techs in the tray, but you're actually not limited to 7. So if I were to completely fill this up and then draw an 8th one, I just put it off to the side. When I research a rare tech, I can put this on any track that I want because it's colorless. So let's say I put it on the pink one. This will increase my discount, but I have to be careful because this will also decrease the number of pink techs that I can research this game. So as soon as this track fills up, that's it. I can't research any more pink techs that game. Gray planets like this one are wild, so you can actually put any kind of population cube on there you want, money, science, or materials. But when you remove the cube, you don't have to remember which track it originally came from. You can actually put it back on any track you want. Advanced gray planets like this one, marked with the white star and the white border, can only receive population cubes if you've researched the related advanced tech. Okay, so let's say I've only researched the advanced mining tech. That means I can only put a brown population cube on that spot. Orbitals and monoliths are structures that you can build on any sector you control, so long as you've researched the required tech. The cost to build these is located right here on your player board. Now, we already talked about monoliths in the last video, but orbitals are essentially a planet that you build. All the rules that apply to planets and population cubes also apply to orbitals. The only difference is that orbitals can accept population from your money track or science track. So this tech tile kind of reminds you of that if you forget. Now, if you ever have to remove a population cube from one of your orbitals, you get to choose whether to put this back on your money or science track. That means you don't have to remember which one it originally came from. Couple of last important things to note. There can never be more than one of each structure per sector. So this sector is maxed out. I can't build another monolith or orbital here. Another thing to note is that whoever controls the sector controls the structures there. So building structures essentially paints a big target on your back. And if someone wants these, they can just invade and take these over. So make sure you can defend them. Missiles are a very powerful weapon. Now, the tech you need to research is pretty expensive, starting at 16, but once you do, you can upgrade your ships with missiles. Now, missiles work just like regular weapons, okay, in that you roll the number and color of the dice shown on the ship part, and hits are affected by shields and computers just like normal, but the difference is that missiles are fired at the very beginning of combat, before any other weapons are fired. So this can be extremely powerful, because if you have enough missiles, then you can win a combat before it even starts, just by the sheer number of dice that you roll. But there's a catch. Okay, the catch is that missiles are only fired once per battle. That means that if your opponent survives the missiles, then you have to rely on your normal cannons to finish them off, or else you have to retreat. If both you and your opponent's ships have missiles, then missiles are fired in initiative order. Diplomacy is only used when playing with 4 or more players. Now think of diplomacy in this game as a peace treaty and trade agreement. Okay, you both agree not to fight one another, and you also improve each other's economy by exchanging population cubes. So if I want to form diplomatic relations with the red player, 2 things have to happen. First, we need to be at peace with one another. That means that I can't have a ship in the same sector where red has a ship, or where red has control, because that would mean we're about to fight one another. So we have to be at peace. We also have to have a full wormhole connection between 2 sectors that we control. Then, at any time during our actions, either one of us can offer diplomacy. And if we agree, then we can exchange ambassador tiles. I place a population cube from any of my tracks onto my ambassador tile, exchange it with red's ambassador, and then I put this on any open ambassador spot on my reputation track. I would not be able to put it on this spot because there's no white outline here. If my reputation track is full, then I can remove one of my reputation tiles and put it back in the bag to make room. But I cannot remove an ambassador tile to make room, so this one has to stay here. And by the way, these are each worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. Diplomatic relations remain until the end of the game, and I am not allowed to voluntarily discard ambassador tiles. However, I can break diplomacy by making an act of aggression. That means if I move my ship into the same sector where red has a ship, or where red has control, then I have declared war on red. I have betrayed him, and our diplomatic relationship immediately ends. We give back our ambassador tiles. I can put this population cube back on any track that I want. And then, since I initiated that act of aggression, I have to take this traitor tile, which is worth -2 victory points at the end of the game. Now also, as long as I hold this traitor tile, I am not allowed to make any more diplomatic relations with anybody. However, my existing diplomatic relations with other players still remain in place. A couple of final interesting notes. There's only 1 traitor tile, so if someone else betrays another player, then I actually pass this tile off to them, and I'm off the hook. It works like hot potato, so only the last player to break diplomacy gets this tile. Also, ships still pin each other, even if we have diplomatic relations. So if my ship stops here because it gets pinned, well, that's an act of aggression, and that would break diplomacy. But moving through one of red's sectors is not considered an act of aggression. Okay, this makes the cloaking device tech really good for keeping diplomacy, because this tech would allow me to sneak past one of red's ships without getting pinned. If your money ever goes below 0, then you are actually eliminated from the game because your civilization has collapsed. Okay, so if at the end of the round you are not able to pay your upkeep cost with the money you have in the bank plus what you're about to produce, then you are bankrupt. and you must do something to get more money. Okay, you have two options. Option number one, you can trade other resources for money using your trade value shown here. But just remember with that, you can only trade the resources you currently have in the bank. So that's these right here. I cannot trade with resources I'm about to produce because these are produced after I pay upkeep. The second option you have to avoid bankruptcy during the upkeep phase is to abandon control of sectors that you have. Okay, so in this example, I need to pay an upkeep cost of 7. So I'm going to abandon control of this sector because there's only one materials planet on there, so it's not that valuable to me. So once I put this back on my track, now my upkeep is 5. I'm getting closer. I only need 1 more money. But as soon as I abandon control of the sector, I need to immediately put this population cube back on the track where it came from. Now, with the last money, I could abandon control of this sector to pay for it, but the problem is this has a money planet on it, which means abandoning control of that would reduce my income because that cube would go back on my track. So I don't think I'm going to do that. Instead, to get my last money, I am going to trade these 4 resources to get that last money I need, and then I'll need to pay these 2 plus the 3 I'm producing. So that goes to 0, and now I've paid my upkeep cost. One last thing you should note, bankruptcy is the only time you can freely abandon control of sectors like this. Okay, normally you'd have to take an influence action to do that. So if you ever have sectors that you no longer want, like this one that only has 1 single planet on it, then you can plan to go bankrupt so that you can abandon that sector for free during the upkeep phase. This move is called tactical bankruptcy by the community. There is a whole action that we haven't even talked about yet because it's the least used and the most complex. So I'm going to have to show you a ton of examples just to explain all the nuances. But let's start simple, okay? The influence action allows you to move up to 2 of your influence disks from one spot to a different spot. And as a bonus, you also get to flip over 2 of your colony ships. And yes, you are allowed to take this action just to flip these over, even if you don't move any of your influence disks. So let's take an influence action. The first thing you do is pick up one of your influence disks. That could be from your influence track or from a sector that you control. Then you put that influence disk on a different spot. Okay, that could be an uncontrolled sector where only you have a ship, or it could be a completely empty sector that has a wormhole connection to a sector that you control or where you have a ship. So let's go through some examples now. I can move an influence disk from a sector I control back onto my influence track, but whenever I do that, I have to put my population cubes back on their tracks. I can move an influence disk from my track to an uncontrolled sector where only I have a ship. I would not be able to influence this sector if there were an enemy ship there, because we're about to have a battle, and that battle is going to decide who gets to influence that sector. I can move an influence disk from my track to any of these completely empty sectors. Okay, in this example, I can do it because it's connected to a sector that I control. In this example, it's connected to a sector that I have a ship. And in this sector, it's the same rule. It's connected to a sector where I have a ship, even if that ship is pinned. I am not allowed to pick up a disk from a sector and then immediately put it back on the same sector. Okay, I could pick it up and then put it back on a different influence action on another turn. I am not allowed to move my influence disk from this sector to this sector because the one I just abandoned is the only one connected to it. Okay, the steps happen separately. So first, I remove my influence and population cubes. Then I choose a valid sector to influence. And since I'm not connected here anymore, I can't influence it. And this is the last most complicated example. Okay, I'm going to take an influence action, and for my first activation, I'm going to influence this sector because I'm connected to it. Then I'm going to flip over 2 of my colony ships because I can do this at any time during my action. And let's populate these 2 planets here. Now for my second activation, I'm going to influence this sector because now I'm connected to it where I wasn't connected before. And then I'm going to take my bonus for the influence action to flip my 2 colony ships back over. And you can see where this is going because now I can flip them right back over again to populate these planets. Okay, there's a lot going on there, but your 2 takeaways should be, number 1, that each influence activation resolves separately, which is why I was able to influence this one out here after I was connected to it. And your second takeaway is that using and flipping these colony ships over is very flexible. You can do it at any time during your action. We did talk about the upgrade action, but there's more you need to know. First of all, I wanted to point out that these ship parts that require a tech are a darker shade of blue than these basic ship parts up here at the top. Okay, you can also tell because of that symbol in the lower left-hand corner. Well, in the last video, I showed you that the Gauss shields were one of the 6 basic kinds of ship parts, but it actually does require a tech because of that darker shade of blue. Okay, it just so happens, though, that the Orion hegemonies start with that tech, which is why I was able to use them in the last video. Some races, like the Orion here, have ship parts that lie outside of the blueprint, so this is permanent and can never be covered up. When you upgrade a ship blueprint, it instantly upgrades all of the ships of that type, no matter where they are on your board. You can upgrade ships that you haven't built yet, and you can even upgrade starbases even if you haven't researched this starbase tech yet. When you take an upgrade action, there are a few more rules you have to follow. First, you must always have a drive on your ships. You can never cover them up. That's not allowed. But also, the starbases can never have drives. Okay, so you can never add a drive. That's not allowed. And that little symbol there tells you that. Second, you can never stack ship parts on top of one another. Third, you can't move ship parts around after they're placed. And fourth, you are allowed to remove as many ship parts as you want on your upgrade action for free. Just note that if you were to ever remove a ship part that came from a discovery tile, then you can never put it back on because this is removed then from the game. Also remember how I said in the last video that your energy production must always be at or above your energy consumption. Well, that's actually only checked at the end of your action. So that means that you are able to remove a source that would normally take you below the threshold as long as you replace it in the same action with another source. In the last video, I showed you a simple combat between me and the Ancients, but things get a lot more complicated when multiple players are involved. So what we're going to do now is show you a more complicated example and walk you through all 6 steps of the combat phase, which are laid out for you right here on the back page of the rulebook. Step 1 is determine battles. Okay, first we just have to find all the sectors that contain opposing ships, which is here and here. Now, battles are resolved one sector at a time in descending numerical order. So that means because this sector number is higher than that sector number, we're going to start by resolving this battle between me and the Ancients. Step 2 is resolve battles. Okay, so we're going to start by resolving this battle over here, and what I like to do is move the ships off and just mark this sector with a combat die so I know where the ships came from. Next, I need to arrange these ships in initiative order. Okay, fastest ships are my interceptors, then the cruisers, which are also faster than the Ancients. And you know that defenders always break initiative ties, but they are the slowest in this case. Now, the next thing that happens is we fire missiles in this order. Okay, none of the ships have missiles in this combat, so we just get to skip over this phase, and we're going to proceed with normal engagement rounds. Battles are resolved through repeated engagement rounds. Okay, one engagement round is where we activate each ship group in this order, and after that we start a new engagement round from the top again, and we keep repeating these engagement rounds until all of one player's ships have retreated or are destroyed. Okay, so first we're going to activate my interceptors, and they both miss. My cruiser misses. The ancient ship scores a double hit, which actually destroys my cruiser. So that's now out of the battle. And we start a new engagement round from the top again. My interceptors start. And I'm not feeling so good about my odds of survival here. So instead of attacking with both of my ships, I can retreat my entire ship group. Okay, I can't retreat just one of them and fight with the other. I have to make one decision with the entire ship group. So I'm going to try to save them and retreat them. To retreat, there has to be an eligible sector that I can retreat to. Okay, an eligible sector is one that's adjacent, that I control, that has a wormhole connection, and there's no opposing ships there. Okay, that is a safe sector for me to retreat to, so I'm going to put my ships on the border here. That ends their activation, so they cannot attack, and they are retreating. Okay, but they have not fully retreated yet, because ships don't complete their retreat until the beginning of their next activation. So effectively what that means is they're running away, but all the opposing ships get one shot to destroy them as they're running away. All right, so the ancient ship is going to fire at them, and they roll a hit, so one of my retreating ships gets destroyed. Now it's back to the interceptors, and they finish retreating now. Okay, so now they're safe, and the battle is over. Now that was the only battle in this sector, so now it's time to draw reputation tiles from the bag. And this reference tile tells you how many to draw based on what kinds of ships you destroy, and at the top here it even shows you always draw one tile just for participating in the battle. However, I actually don't get to draw that bonus because I retreated my last ship group. That's right, there is a retreat penalty that says as soon as my last remaining ship group starts retreating, I lose that bonus, even if those ships are destroyed while they're retreating. So now I would still get to draw any reputation tiles for ships I've destroyed, but I didn't destroy that ancient ship at all, so I actually get nothing. So let's move on to this more complicated sector, starting all the way from the top again. Battles are always 1 versus 1, so when there are multiple players involved like this, we have to determine who's going to fight who first. We resolve battles in reverse order of entry. Okay, this means that the first player who entered the sector is the defender and battles last, while the last player who entered is the attacker and battles first. So the last shall be first and the first shall be last, right? There is one exception, though, for the player who controls the sector, which in this case is green. So green is always considered the defender here because it's their own sector, so they will always battle last, regardless of when their ships entered the sector. Since green is involved in the battle and they control the sector, they are the defenders and they battle last. Then blue entered next, then I entered, then red entered last. Okay, so this is the order of entry. Now this reverse order is the order of battle. Okay, so red and I are going to have a battle first, and whoever wins this battle is going to go on to battle blue, and then the winner of that battle is finally going to fight green. Also just note that the non-player ships, like the ancients here, will always battle last no matter what. Now we resolve the battle between me and red. So the first thing we have to do is arrange all of these ships in initiative order. So my interceptors are actually the fastest ships, so they fire first. All of these ship groups are tied for initiative. They all have the same. So since red entered the sector first, they fire before my ships. And since my ships are the same initiative, I actually can choose the order each and every engagement round. So I'll choose to fire my dreadnought first for this round, but then after this engagement round is over and we start a new engagement round, then I can switch these if I want to. Next, all missiles are fired in this order. Red's interceptors actually are equipped with 2 missiles each. So they're going to roll a ton of dice, but since my ships have shields, only this one hit goes through, and they actually destroy my cruiser. So that's now out of the battle. All the missiles are fired now, so now we just proceed with normal engagement rounds of attacking or retreating. But this one's going to be pretty easy because Red's interceptors did not have any cannons equipped. They went for an all-in missile strategy, hoping to destroy me in one go. But since I survived, they can't attack during the engagement rounds because they don't have any cannons. And they can't retreat because there's no sector that they control adjacent to where the battle is. So if they can't attack and they can't retreat, then they're automatically going to be destroyed by my ships just with enough time. I'm going to be able to roll dice long enough to be able to kill all of them. So we'll just skip all that, call it a loss for Red, and I'm going to keep these ships by my reputation track to remind me of how many reputation tiles I get to draw later. One interesting side note is that it is possible to have a stalemate where neither player can destroy the other's ships. This usually happens when all the remaining ships only have missiles, and if that happens, then the attacker must retreat, or else his ships are automatically destroyed. Now we go back to step 2 and resolve the battle between me and Blue. Of course, the first thing we do, just like before, is arrange all the ships in initiative order, just like this. Then we fire missiles in this order, and none of us have any missiles, so we just skip over this to the normal engagement rounds. There's a couple of last things you need to know about rolling dice. First of all, I don't need to choose targets before rolling dice. So I'm not going to say I'm targeting the cruiser. I just roll the dice, and then I can assign hits based on my computers and their shields. So while this 5 might hit the cruiser, maybe it's not going to hit the dreadnought if they have shields. So I choose after I roll the dice. Also, hits on a single die like this can't be split up between multiple targets. So if I roll a hit on the orange die, both of these hits have to be assigned to a single ship. Alright, you know how this works by now, so blah blah blah, I kill both of Blue's ships. I keep these next to my reputation track so I remember how many tiles I'm going to draw later. But my dreadnought sustained 2 damage, marked by these damage cubes, which is going to carry over into the final battle with green. Damage isn't repaired until the very end of the combat phase. We're also going to skip the battle with green and just say that green destroyed my interceptor, and I destroyed the green ships, so I'm going to put these next to my reputation track. Now that all the battles in that sector are finished, it's time to draw reputation tiles. Players draw reputation tiles in order of entry into the sector. You want to draw earlier because then there's better odds at finding the higher valued tiles. So in our example, Blue was the first one to add ships in that sector, then me, then Red, and lastly green. The rulebook makes no mention of the defender drawing first, so since green was the last one to add ships, they get the short end of the stick. We're going to follow this reference tile to see how many tiles each player draws based on all the ships that they destroyed. So Blue's the only one that didn't destroy anything, so they're just going to draw 1 tile and keep it. I'm going to draw 5, which is the maximum, and I keep the highest one. The rest of these go back in the bag. Red is going to draw 3 and keep the highest one, put the rest in the bag. And lastly, green is going to draw 2 and keep the highest, put this back in the bag. After we draw our reputation tiles, return all of the ships to the owners so they can be built on a future round. We've now resolved all the battles in this sector, and since there are no more sectors with opposing ships, we finish the combat phase with the final 4 steps. At this step, if you have a ship on an enemy sector where population cubes are, then you get to attack them. You want to attack the population because you can't take control of the sector until all of the enemy population is destroyed. I'll talk about this situation in just a minute. Let's just say, for example, first, that I was able to sneak a cruiser onto this red sector at the very end of the round, so red didn't have time to protect it. Even though no battle took place here, I am still able to attack the population now to try to take control of that sector. Let me show you how it works. Attacking population cubes is similar to regular combat, but there are 4 differences. First of all, each of my ships only gets to attack 1 time. I get 1 roll, and that's it. Second, no missiles are allowed. Third, damage can be split up between multiple targets. So if I roll a hit on this orange die, that will actually destroy 2 population cubes. And lastly, you don't get any reputation tiles for destroying population. Apart from that, though, hits are determined just like normal, with shields and computers all factored in, but population cubes have a shield value of 0. Let's say that my cruiser rolls 1 hit and decides to destroy this science population cube. This is given back to the red player, who's going to put it on the appropriate graveyard spot on the appropriate track. So for a gray planet, it would go on any track they choose, and for an orbital, it would go back to money or science. But what this does, this graveyard spot, is it allows red to produce that resource with that cube one last time, and then during the cleanup phase, it is returned back to the track. Here's a couple of techs you should know about. The neutron bombs allow you to automatically destroy population cubes without rolling dice, while the neutron absorber tech will absorb neutron bombs of your opponents and cancels it out. Now let's get back to this green sector here. As it turns out, the Planta have a negative ability that says that all of their population cubes are automatically destroyed by everybody. So I don't even have to roll dice. These cubes just come right off here. It's kind of like everybody has the neutron bombs against the Planta. It's kind of bad, but don't worry, the Planta can make up for it. One thing to note, though, is that the Planta cannot use this neutron absorber tech because their race ability always applies. At this time, if you have a ship on an enemy sector with no population cubes, then you can remove any influence disk there and give it back to the owner. I can't remove Red's yet because there's still a population cube there, so Red's going to get a chance to defend that sector again next round. Next, you can influence any sector where you have a ship and there's no other influence disk there. So I'm going to go ahead and place my influence disk here. Now this is really interesting, okay, because it means that you can control an empty sector for free just by parking your ship on it. You don't need to spend an influence action and you don't need to have a combat. It just means your ship has to survive until this point of the round to do it. But it's always nice to save an action if you can. If the order matters of influencing these sectors, then just do it in descending numerical order, just like combat. At this time, if you have at least one ship in a sector with a discovery tile, then you can take the discovery tile. You don't need to place an influence disk in the sector to take the discovery. And the very last thing you do is to repair all damage from your ships by removing all of the purple cubes. And that is the end of the combat phase. There are 4 kinds of tech tiles, denoted by these white symbols here at the bottom of these tech tiles. The square symbol shows you that it unlocks a ship part. The wrench symbol shows you that it unlocks a new kind of thing you can build. This starburst symbol tells you that it is an instant one-time effect and then it goes away. So this will instantly give you +1 influence disk, but then nothing else after. And everything else that's blank is a permanent ongoing ability for the rest of the game. These little white tick marks here on the side of some tech tiles will show you that there is an energy consumption on the corresponding ship part. So you see a 4 cost shows 4 ticks, and 2 cost, 2 ticks. Now let's talk about some specific techs in more detail. These 3 techs grant extra activations, but they do not apply to reactions, because reactions always have an activation number of 1. The Ancient Labs tech allows you to take a random discovery tile from the supply, but if you draw one of these discoveries, the Ancient Monolith, Orbital, or Cruiser, then these are placed on your starting sector. Okay, normally these are placed on the sector where you found them, but if you find them with Ancient Labs, they go on your starting sector. This wormhole generator tech allows you to treat half wormhole connections just as if they were full wormhole connections. So that means you can move, explore, influence, and retreat to adjacent sectors that have half wormhole connections just like they were full. Okay, you can even explore off of an empty side of a sector as long as the explored sector creates that other half that you need. The only exception to being able to treat all half wormholes as full wormholes is diplomacy. Okay, there must be a full wormhole connection between the two sectors the players control in order to offer diplomacy. This discovery tile is called Ancient Tech, and it lets you take the cheapest regular tech you don't already have for free. That means that you're not allowed to choose a rare tech with it. The Draco have some really interesting abilities on their board. They're rumored to be descended from the Ancients, so their goal is to protect these ancient ships. And note that the Guardians and the GCDS do not count as Ancients. The Draco have 3 abilities. And the first you can see right up here at the top, in that they can put influence discs on sectors containing ancient ships. This can be really good for an early boost because they don't have to fight the Ancients. In fact, they can't fight the Ancients, but that allows them to put population cubes on the planets. They can build and move ships on there freely. But since they can't attack the Ancients, they can't take these discovery tiles. As long as the Ancient is there guarding it, this has to remain here. The Draco also have an enhanced explore action, which you can see right here. They get to draw 2 sectors, and they can keep 1 or none of these and discard the rest. So I'm definitely taking this ancient one because as soon as I put this with the discovery and the ancient ship on it, I can immediately influence it and start populating those planets. The last ability is shown right here. The Draco get 1 victory point for every ancient ship that's alive at the end of the game. These abilities can create some very strange situations, so here are a few clarifications you need to know. If the Draco control a sector with an ancient ship, then for the order of battles, the Ancients will always battle last, even though the Draco are considered the defender for controlling that sector. So let's say, for example, I choose to invade this sector, then Draco build a ship in the sector. So first I'm going to do combat with the Draco, who is considered the defender because they own the sector. And then if I win that combat and destroy their ship, now I fight the Ancients. Now let's say that I destroy the Ancient ship, but I only destroy 1 of Draco's population cubes. That means that Draco still maintains control of the sector, and here's something really interesting. The Draco would actually get to take this discovery tile now for free because the ancient ship is gone, so it's no longer defending the discovery. So the Draco would get to claim this. This little trick makes the neutron absorber tech really good for the Draco because it can help them survive attacks on their population like this. The Draco also have a really cool exploit for the influence action, and it goes like this. Let's say I explore a Ring 1 sector, and it is double Ancients. Okay, well, I can't influence this sector yet because I would need to destroy the Ancients first, but the Draco can. Okay, so what the Draco can do here is move an interceptor into the galactic center where it's probably going to die, and it's pinned, so it can't move anymore. But on the next turn, it can take an influence action. Even though the ship is pinned, that's allowed. And after they control the sector, they can start populating those planets. They can start building up a defense on this sector. Really, for just sacrificing 1 interceptor, that is an incredibly powerful move. When you take a move action, you are allowed to activate the same ship multiple times. The Explore abilities on the Planta and the Draco are optional. You can choose to just explore 1 sector if you wish. In the last video, I said that you can explore from a ship that is not engaged with any enemies. What that really means is that you can explore from a ship that is not pinned. When I explore and choose to reject this tile and not place it, I put this face up in a discard pile by the stack. When the deck is completely out, if there's nothing more to draw from, then I shuffle this up to make a new stack. But as soon as the stack is completely run out and there's nothing left in the discard, then that's it. I can't explore anymore. I said in the last video that it's usually better to wait to use your colony ships until the upkeep phase at the end of the round, but there is actually one advantage to using them sooner. During the action phase, I'm allowed to use colony ships even if there's enemy ships there, whereas during the upkeep phase, I can't do that because at that point, my population is under attack. So if you think a sector is going to be fought over, consider using your colony ships sooner rather than later. Warp portals are an optional module that contains these 3 sectors, 1 rare tech and 1 discovery tile. The way this works is all of these warp portals are connected to each other. So this makes for a much more interactive game because 2 players that are sitting across the table might not normally interact with each other, but if they have 2 warp portals, then they're considered adjacent. So they can fight and they can do diplomacy across the table like this. The other neat thing about these tiles is that they're extremely resource rich. This is a discovery and 2 planets, which is unheard of, really. The downside of taking these, though, is that it essentially opens a back door into your area that can be exploited later. So if this sounds fun to you, just keep all these in the normal components, but if you would like a less interactive game, then you can remove all of this during setup. All of the components in these 3 trays are unlimited. That means if you run out of a certain ship part, you can use some other substitute. And same goes for orbitals and monoliths. If you run out of those, you have these double-sided tokens you can use. But if you run out of the tokens, you can just use some other substitute for them. But everything else in the game, all of the other components, are limited. That means if those run out, that's it. Also, did you ever notice that the lids for these table trays are embossed so they can hold a couple of blueprints and a reference tile? I thought that was kind of nifty. If you ever have more influence discs than you have spots available on your track, you just stack the extras on top of the 0 spot, and you can keep using these just like normal. If you ever get more than 40 resources, then when you come back around to the top here with your track marker, just make sure you use this little plus 40 side so that you can easily tell, okay, I have 42 here instead of 2. It is possible to have a production of 0 of a certain resource if all the spots are filled. So if you ever need to put another cube back on the materials brown track, then I would have to pick one of the other tracks instead. You do still have to pay your upkeep cost at the last round of the game, so don't go too crazy. If there's a tie for victory points at the end of the game, then the tiebreaker is whoever has the most total resources in the bank. So you add all these up and whoever has the most is the winner. And that concludes all of the rules for the base game of Eclipse. In the next video, I'm going to show you all of the rules for the expansions in the Worlds Afar Collection. Thanks for watching.